So today, I'm going to start a new series. The last 2 years, I don't know, I've kind of lost track. I did one continuous series on the Yoga Sutras and the 8 limbs of yoga. And so we've worked our way through the 8 limbs of yoga and kind of felt like maybe it was time to let that go after we kind of got through the last few talks on the 8th limb. It seemed like enough is enough. And so although I feel like I could talk about the Yoga Sutras endlessly applicable, it is still my favorite teaching, and I feel very much the basis of my practice. As I've said many times before, I feel the Yoga Sutras represent the science of self-realization. It is a method that doesn't call on religion or a religious orientation in order to practice. It is pure method that simply says, here's a way, here's time-tested methods. If you apply these, you'll get these results. Makes it a science. Right? It's reproducible, it's predictable. But the orientation, for the most part, the orientation of the Yoga Sutras is the orientation of the seeker. Right? It is the person who is kind of coming out of the fog of unconsciousness and identification with the separate self, the conventional self. And is beginning to suspect that there's perhaps more to life than what we're given in our conventional perspective. And as a person goes through that, then there's this whole amazing alchemical process that's ahead of them. And the Yoga Sutras serve that very well. And most of the teachings that we have, whatever they are, whether they're Christian or Islam or Buddhist, Hindu, most all of the traditions speak to that person who is beginning to wake up and has that whole developmental arc to go through, and they're there to serve that journey. And so most of us, that's what we hear, it's what we read, it's what we encounter. Right? If we're in spiritual communities, that's probably the culture that we're in. But there's another perspective that is also around, and there are teachings that speak from that perspective. They're just perhaps less popular. And we'll talk a little bit about why that might be, why they're less popular. But my goal here today, and a challenge to myself, is to take this next year and to try and speak from this other perspective. Right? So I can put some words on it, words that we'll work to define more today and over the next year. But the perspective I've been speaking from the Yoga Sutras and the method and the practice and the what there is to do is from the perspective of, from the dual point of view, the I and thou, there's me and then there's God, spirit, true nature, whatever you call that other thing, emptiness, void, self, different terms defined in different traditions, but all of the traditions that speak from the dual point of view posit a me and an it, and there's a separateness, and I have to get from here to there. The non-dual traditions skip over all of that, right? And go right to the always already are. Your true nature is your true nature is your true nature. It always has been, it always will be, it always is. It is in this moment just like it will be in 10 years after you follow whatever path you follow and you wake up to realize that you are who you thought you were but you didn't know. Right? The non-dual traditions say that that's equally true in every moment. It's always the case. And there's nothing that you can do to get that because you already have it. Right? One of the phrases that's that's used that I like is like trying to get your feet. How can you get your feet? You already have them. Right? They're not there. There's nothing you need to do. It's already accomplished. And so the non-dual tradition holds that position. So it's kind of the epitome of the saying of before Zen, you chop wood and carry water, and after Zen, you chop wood and carry water. Right? Which can sound cute and even inspiring in the right moment. When you hear that, it can be like, yeah, chop wood, carry water. But what does that mean? You know, before Zen, after Zen, right? Like, so this was a question I had in my early days as a seeker. Was I had a sense that would not be that saying would not carry the weight that it seems to carry to be around for hundreds of years if it didn't contain in it some deep and significant meaning. But it wasn't clear to me what that meaning was. I just knew that it was said at certain times, and students who'd been practicing for a long time would all nod in agreement. Yeah, but what? And so I had an opportunity one time to sit with a great teacher, and you know, he gave me the opportunity to be in open dialogue with him, a rare event that he would let a non-student, I was not a student of his, just a friend of a friend who ended up in the room and didn't know the etiquette to know that I had no place talking to him, didn't know. So I just presumed it, and he returned the favor by engaging me in a conversation, and it became about a 3-hour, I don't know what, you know, display of ignorance and on my part and compassion on his part. But we came to this place as I was arguing with him and asked this question, you know, this before Zen, after Zen, right? There's a difference. What is that difference, right? Because, again, he kept talking in this way that was pointing to something but would never say what the something was, and I was frustrated. Like, just tell me. I feel like you're teasing me. It's the bait and switch. You know, it's what's behind door number 2, but you can't tell. You have to give up what you have to find out what's behind door number 2, but I'm not telling you what's behind there, and it could be good, it might not be, I don't know. You know? And I wanted to know. Like, tell me what it is before I make the decision, right? To give up what I have for this whatever it is that you're going to offer me. And so I felt like I had him finally, 3 hours, boxing him in. It's like, okay, this thing, before Zen, you know, chop wood, carry water. After Zen, chop wood, carry water. Something happens in the before and after. What is that? I had him, right? And at this point, he gets up and he looks at me and he says, "Do you have a practice?" I said, "Yes." "Practice more." And he walked out. And I laugh at that, and I totally appreciate what he gave me in that moment. All right? And it started a new level of my own search, my own sincerity in my search to try and find that answer. So the next thing that came up without any particular plan, but part of the I need to find it and looking around, you know, kind of fell in with this group of odd people from the Brima Institute in Berkeley, California. If any of you are familiar with Brima, there's no good reason to be. There's this tiny little group with this odd little practice that is fundamentally a non-dual practice. But it's why they're a little group and odd. But they're doing their thing. So I just happened to fall in with this couple that were here to do mission work for the Brima Institute. And they would do these satsang with Gangaji at their apartment in Uptown. I had no idea who Gangaji was. I'm sure most of you don't have any idea who she is. And mostly because she's a non-dual teacher, and we, for the most part, avoid them. So they're not in popular culture. So we'd go to their apartment and we'd watch a video of Gangaji giving her talk on non-dual realization. And we'd do weeks of this, and it was very compelling and inspiring, and I started to feel a little bit of that fire that builds for a teacher, and I was feeling like I think she's got it, right? And I want to get it. I want some of what she's talking about. But I didn't feel like I was going to get it sitting in an apartment in Uptown watching a video. I needed to go see her. Right? So she taught she teaches all over the world, but at the time she happened to be going to make a pass through Marin in California, north of San Francisco, which is kind of her home base. So I booked a flight to San Francisco, rented a car, drove up to Marin, got a hotel room, showed up at the retreat center for her talk. And you know, she didn't do or say anything different at all than what she says in the videos. Which was a little disappointing to me, right? Because I kind of thought, well, this is just the video, and all she kind of says is the primary teaching of the non-dual school is stop. That's it. That's the whole teaching. Stop. Then there's all the talk that goes around that, and, you know, before it and after it, and tries to put it, you know, in some kind of context. But that's it, right? The entire teaching. Just stop. So I flew to San Francisco, drove up to Marin, sat in a room. She said, just stop. And then she continued to have hours and hours of conversation with the people gathered in the room about all their reasons why they can't just stop. And her only advice and her only suggestion and her only support was to continue to remind them to just stop. So, didn't seem to do much for me. Continued my trip, had a good time, enjoyed Marin, came home, rejoined my friends at the satsang with Gangaji in Uptown. Of course, they were very excited because I had gone to see her, and what was that like, and what was she like, and what was the experience, and how did it feel, all of that. What was the food like? You know, which, in many ways, I mean, I appreciate for many years, the only, you know, and best experience story that I would tell, and kind of the longing to return, was for a piece of pecan pie that I had at a restaurant at Point Break. That was the highlight of my trip, going to see this revered teacher, was a piece of pecan pie that I had. So sitting in the apartment in Uptown watching the tapes of Gangaji, it occurred to me one day, for no good reason, she never says anything different. Her teaching is really I would say one-dimensional, but that's not really true. But one has to get there. But it occurred to me one day that maybe she was serious. Like, maybe what she was talking about was not a philosophy, wasn't just entertainment. There wasn't a hidden teaching in there that if I just listened, if I held enough reverence towards her, that the mystery would be revealed, right? That there was something and I wasn't getting it. And it just occurred to me, like, maybe she just means what she's saying. Maybe all she wants me to do is to just stop, actually. So it seemed simple enough, right? Like, oh, no magic, no altered state, no great moment of enlightenment. Just stop all the activity, all the doings of the ego. What if you just stopped it? So, being the person who I was at the time, willing to kind of try anything, I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll take it for serious. I'm going to stop. Well, if any of you have tried to just stop doing something, right? Many times I've tried to stop eating ice cream, right? Yeah, not so easy. Some things we can stop doing, but there's still a long list of things we can't stop doing. Somebody in your life that tends to kind of push your buttons and sets you off and get you all upset about something, and just try it sometime, deciding, like, I'm not going to let them push my buttons. Right? Somehow you just get more buttons, right? They just push them better. Yeah. So that eventually led me to a school that although in all appearances was not a non-dual school, they were actually a non-dual school in a certain way of the mystery of things. They were their own koan in that they appeared to be a dual school with a method, but that was just, the bait to lure the students in, only at some point to say, oh yeah, that's right, we're a non-dual school, and all of this stuff that you've been doing, we're kidding. But by that time it was too late, and I totally, I had bought it and invested myself in it, and allowed them to pull the rug out from underneath me, and have great appreciation for that. So that perspective of the non-dual, a way to think of it, right? To put some terms on it, right? In the philosophy of enlightenment, of self-realization, there's two currents, what they call evolution and involution. Right? Evolution is we could say, as a person, evolution is starting off as a child and going through your life, and you evolve. Right? And much about your view of the world evolves as you go. That's evolution. Involution is the opposite. It's this idea that true nature, spirit, starts from some place of complete openness, complete freedom, a place that we can't imagine with our mind. Right? Because our mind always wants to define it, and it's this completely undefinable somethingness. And it starts from there, and it slowly takes on limitations and constraints, structure, as it involves itself down to the finest, smallest, most structured point. And then evolution starts. And it works its way back up to that place that it started. And that's the cycle. That spirit involves itself into the manifest world, and then evolves itself back to this starting point. Which is just another way of saying, before Zen, chop wood and carry water. After Zen, chop wood and carry water. Before involution, there's just isness. And after involution and evolution, there is just isness. But yet there's a radical difference that happens in that process, and there's something about that process that seems very valuable. So most of the schools, the dual schools, speak from the point of view of evolution. The ego in some place of its development, looking forward at its forward development, where it's going. Right? And what one needs to do to get from where I am to where I want to be. And here's what you need to do, and here's the practices and the methods, and here are the problems and the barriers and the blocks and the confusions, and this is what you've got to do. The non-dual schools turn that around, and they speak from this side back to the separate self. Right? So they speak from the place of having already arrived and talk about it back down the line of evolution. So maybe an analogy of that. How many of you in this room have ever been a teenager? Right, all of us. How many of you in this room know a teenager now? Right, okay. So maybe, sometimes it's easier to do this if you imagine a teenager that you know, but secretly, I'm really talking to the teenager that you were. But it's easier to look and see follies in other people sometimes. So we'll pretend we're thinking about the teenager we know. But have you ever noticed with teenagers, no matter how much wisdom you're communicating to them, because by now you've traveled some of the difficulties of life, you've navigated some of them, you've had to figure out this thing maybe called work and money and how that goes, and that saving is, maybe a good idea. For example, like delayed gratification has some value to it, right? That although you hold genuine wisdom that you have earned, in trying to communicate that to a teenager, rarely do they ever just say, oh, right, thank you. Take it in, change what they were going to do, and start living that way. I mean, it's possible, but it rarely ever happens, right? And not for any, particularly wrong, bad, pathological reason. It's just the nature of a teenager and what they're trying to do. They're in this process of autonomy and figuring out who they are and how they're going to be in the world, and they don't want, they're actively pushing away the how you are, how other people are, trying to find out how they are. That's the place they're in, developmentally. That's what's happening, right? But for those of us who know, we look at that and go, yeah, I get that's what you're doing, but just take a moment, like make a note. The next time you're in this situation and you're thinking about making this choice, and you have all these reasons why this is a good choice, it's not. Can you just remember this? Don't make that choice. Later, you'll thank me. Right? You can do a lot of that, and you can't constrain all of the behavior. Right? So this is no different than what's happening in the non-dual tradition. Right? The non-dual tradition, the non-dual teacher, is speaking to us with all of that wisdom, all of the wisdom of having made the evolutionary journey and realized that none of it was necessary. They're speaking back to us saying, that thing you're about to do, you don't need to do that. That's a trick you're playing on yourself. You don't need to. And most of us, as good seekers who we know what we're doing, and this is from my own realization, and I know I've been me all along, and you're not me, and that was fine for you, and we sound like a teenager, right? Sound like a teenager? I know. You don't know, but I know. You're not me. It's my life. I have to make my own decisions, right? So we say some form of that to the teacher or to the teaching, because we think we know. Or even if we don't think we know, it's even deeper than that, and that's the truth of it. That's the frustrating part, is it's even deeper than that. Right? It's not just in our mind as a form of thought. It's not a thought process. Right? It's deeper than that. It's all the way to the core of the structure of the separate self. Right? The separate self is imbued with the survival instinct. Right? It believes it exists and wants to continue existing. So that's the level of resistance, right? It's the survival instinct, right? All the way to the point of death, it will continue to assert its right and its legitimacy to exist. But the core, the heart of the non-dual teaching, sort of, because, unfortunately, there's two non-dual teachings, levels. There's the first level of non-dual that will say the separate self doesn't exist. Right? It's a false structure. There's a second level of non-dual school that realizes, well, although that's true, the separate self is still just a version of the divine. There's no not God. So the separate self is just God showing up in a particular way. And it's totally cute and adorable. Right? It's much like, hopefully, parents feel about their teenagers. It's why we don't kill them. Right? Is they're cute and adorable, and they'll get through it, and it'll be okay. Right? We hope and pray. So the second stage, non-dual school, fully accepts. Right? And that's why that teaching is so hard to really get the truth of, because from that teaching, everything is okay. There's no problem. The ego in its egoity is perfectly God, just showing up as the ego, as the separate self. It's not a problem. But we have to get ourselves there. So first we have to go through the first stage of non-dual awareness, which is the initial recognition that there is no separate self. Right? The I that's there that keeps saying, I have to, but I need, I'm going to, this is what I have to do. Right? It has to go like this. That it's not about what that I is saying. If you're thinking about what that I is saying and you're trying to work that out, like if I could get that I to pick the right teacher or the right teaching or the right whatever, like if I could get my yoga practice, if I could find the right yoga, should I be doing Ashtanga or Iyengar? Should I be working with this teacher or that teacher? Because if I do that, then I got it. I got a line on it. I'm going to get there. If you're involved in that process, then you're still missing the point. Because the point is the one who has all of those thoughts, the one who thinks that they need to figure it out and can and are, that's the one, right? And that's the one that Gangaji is speaking to when she says, stop. Just stop. Stop all of that activity about the this over against that, whatever it is, however big it is, however small it is. The activity of the self that wants to be there constructing its experience. It has all of its thoughts and its needs and its worries and its concern and its history and all of its argument for why it's necessary and all that will go wrong if it doesn't do it, and all that will go right if it does do it, all of that activity, that's the ask of the non-dual schools, to just stop that. Stop that and see what happens. Right? It's part of the frustration of the non-dual school is they don't promise you this really great outcome, right? There's no pie in the sky. There's no, it'll be great, then you'll have eternal peace or equanimity or blissful states. Nope. There's not truly in the non-dual teaching, right? There's none of that. It's stop and find out what happens. That's it. Not a lot for the ego to chew on or hold on to, right? They don't offer you anything, no flotation device. They just want to drop you in the ocean and, well, good luck. it will go some way. And however it goes is the way it's going. Just be with that. That's the ask. Right? So that's what I want to take some time, over this next year. We'll see. I don't know. Next time I'm here, maybe I'll have changed my mind. My intention is to spend some time talking about this and to talk about it from that standpoint, right? From the truth that is realized in the non-dual perspective. And as I said, the downside, the danger, right, speaking for this perspective, is egos don't like it. There's nothing consoling or comforting or enticing about it. It is an utter confrontation to the core of the ego itself. So typically you find, again, there's not very many non-dual schools. Not philosophies, not teachings, but schools, actual schools with students who are practicing in that way. And if you do find one, you'll find it's a pretty small group of people. Right? Because it's hard to take that on. It challenges us right in the very place that we think we are, the us in us, right? The I in me, the one that wants to continue on. Even if I'm completely devoted spiritual student with a full-on practice, right? The 2 years I spent talking about the Yoga Sutras and the 8 limbs of yoga, even if you're a student who's practicing the yamas and the niyamas and your pranayama and your asana, and you're doing all of that, right? This teaching would say, what are you wasting your time for? Like, what are you doing? This is the most ridiculous thing that I can imagine God doing. Why are you doing that? Right? And it takes away all of the supports. Just takes them all away in one brush. And boy, the ego does not like that. It wants its supports, right? It wants to have a sense that it's doing the right thing, it's going someplace, and life is getting better, right? Hope, right? Ego needs its hope to continue. And the non-dual school would come along and it would ask you to give up that thing, give up the hope, right? And if you aren't in a place of hoping, you're utterly depressed and hospitalized, or you're in a place of trusting, right? Because that's what you stand on if you give up hope. The only thing to stand on is trust. And that's what the non-dual school calls us to, is that we can trust. You always already are. Right? God is now, in this moment, perfectly. But we only get to find that out. We only get to step out of our little bubble of hope and onto the solid ground of trust if we stop the activity. But as long as we got some amount of activity, even a little tiny little hedge, just in case, then we're not really standing on the ground. And we have to keep up the activity. Right? So I'm going to take a little bit of time, and as we often do, we're going to do some exercises, not calisthenics. You're going to work in groups of 2. I'm going to give you a question, and we're going to look into this. Right? We're going to look into this activity and try and get in touch with it. Right? What is this activity that in this moment I'm calling hope? Right? This resistance to non-doing. right? Our compulsion to do, to have, to control, to act, to have an activity, to plan, to whatever it is. It takes all these different forms, but we're constantly doing it. We want to try and turn our awareness and find that one directly. Find the separate self and see what it's up to. Look at its activities. Because it's only by doing that, right? By getting in the room with it, by being able to be aware of it functioning, that you can even hold, really, honestly, the idea of stopping, right? You've got to find the activity. Having found the activity, then hold this radical idea of not doing it. And then, being there in the room with the separate self and the activity, holding the idea of not doing it, to see what the separate self does when confronted with what it takes as its end, its annihilation. Right? You stop its activity. It's like a tornado. You know? Like, what is a tornado other than activity? And if you take away the activity, there's no more tornado, right? There just isn't. There's still air, right? There's still cows, but now they're on the ground, right? But you've got a tornado, you've got this activity, and a lot of stuff pulled up into it, but take away that activity, and in a sense, you have nothing. But that's not actually true, right? You just don't have the activity. But everything else that was there is still there. It's actually there in its proper place, right? Barns are still barns, instead of parts of barns flying through the air, right? But the ego is invested in being this tornado, that it is the activity, and that activity is necessary, has that as a core belief, not even a belief, right? Again, it's a belief in the same way as I said, get your feet. Well, you already have your feet, right? So for the ego, it's not a belief, it's nature, right? And so we're going to challenge it right at the place of the thing that it thinks it is, and dare it to not be that. And the only reason to do it, the only reason to do something this silly, is to find out. Right? That's it. It's just to find out what is the difference between before Zen, chop wood and carry water, after Zen, chop wood and carry water. But there's a difference there. What is that difference? Only way to find out is to stop. If you're willing to stop, you'll find out. And then you can decide, is what you find worth it? Those speaking from the non-dual side, those who have done this radical act and have realized it, they would say yes. Yes, it is. But no belief can get you there. Right? You can't believe in what they talk about and arrive there. You can only do one thing, and that's stop. Belief will just hold you back. It's still the ego hoping. Okay, so go ahead and break into groups of 2. I'm going to give you a question, but I won't give you the question until you're settled in your group, because between now and then, you'll probably forget what the question is. So I'm going to keep track of time, so you don't have to worry about that, but just if we end up with an odd number, I'm happy to work with somebody, or we can do a group of 3, either way. But it's looking like we're going to break out even. Okay. Okay. So your first question, so what you're going to do is in your group, one person is going to ask this question just again and again and again and again. It's called a repeating question. So for 2 minutes, you're just going to ask the question, right? And then timer will go off. I'll say switch. The other person will then ask the question, right? So you ask the question, your partner answers. You say thank you. You ask the question again. They answer. You say thank you. You ask the question again. Easy enough. The person answering the question, you just want this question is whatever arises, right? This is a practice in presence. There is no answer to this question. Nobody's keeping track. There's no gold star for having the wittiest, deepest, most insightful, most philosophically correct answer. Nope, no gold stars. It is about being present to yourself as you are in the moment. And so the answer is just whatever arises, whether it makes sense or doesn't make sense. It could be chocolate chip cookies. Okay, fine, a fine answer, right? So that's what you're doing is just going with what arises. And then the person answering the question, we want to try and keep the social personality to a minimum, so we want to keep the smiling and the nodding and the whatnot. Just let them be in touch with themselves and not out on the surface trying to entertain you, the person asking the question. So just kind of keep the social side of it to a minimum, ask the question with sincerity, hear their answer, say thank you, ask the question again. So here's the question. What's right about not stopping? What's right about not stopping? Right? So your partner will ask you what's right about not stopping, and you might say, I don't know, thank you. What's right about not stopping? I have no idea what you're talking about, thank you. What's right about not stopping? Stopping horrifies me, thank you. What's right about not stopping? I so desperately want to stop, but I don't know how, thank you. And on like that. Easy enough? I'm going to keep time. You've got 2 minutes. Away you go.